Welcome to today's discussion where we examine one of the most complex and emotionally charged topics in relationships, the language of deception. When a woman is being unfaithful, her words often reveal more than she intends. Psychology shows that when guilt and fear are present, people tend to rely on certain defense patterns, shifting blame, avoiding details, or creating confusion to protect themselves. These phrases are not just spoken to avoid being caught. They are spoken to manage the emotional storyline around their actions. Understanding these patterns is not about accusation but awareness. In many cases, cheating does not begin with physical behavior. It begins with emotional distance and subtle changes in communication. Tone, timing, and choice of words often shift before the truth ever surfaces. And while every situation is unique, there are recurring psychological strategies used to deny responsibility, redirect suspicion, or minimize concern. Learning to recognize these patterns helps you see behavior clearly instead of second-guessing your intuition. The goal is not confrontation, but clarity. By the end of this video, you will understand how emotional deflection, guilt avoidance, and narrative control operate in conversation. When these phrases appear consistently, and especially when they do not match actions, it becomes a signal that something deeper is being concealed. Awareness allows you to step back, stay grounded, and approach the situation with calm logic rather than emotional panic. Let's begin. When a woman is hiding betrayal, one of the strongest psychological tactics she may rely on is blame shifting. Rather than addressing the behavior in question, she redirects the emotional focus onto you. This often appears in statements such as, "If you trusted me, you wouldn't even ask that," or "You're the one who's ruining this relationship by being suspicious." The goal is not to resolve the concern. The goal is to make you feel guilty for even having it. This tactic works because it places you on the defensive, forcing you to explain why you noticed something rather than allowing you to talk about what you noticed. Blame shifting creates confusion because it attacks your sense of perception. Instead of dealing with the original issue, the conversation suddenly becomes about your character, your trust, your emotional needs, or your past experiences. Psychology calls this gaslighting when it becomes a repeated pattern. It slowly conditions you to doubt your own instincts. You begin to question whether you are being unfair, when in reality the defensive reaction itself may be the clearest signal that something is being hidden. Another key aspect of blame shifting is emotional escalation. If she reacts with anger, tears, or dramatic frustration before addressing the question, the emotional intensity is not accidental. It is used to overwhelm your thinking and shut down the conversation. When the emotional atmosphere becomes loud or chaotic, logic gets pushed out of the room, and confusion takes its place. This is how blame shifting protects the lie. By keeping you too emotionally overwhelmed to continue observing the facts. The crucial thing here is not to respond with aggression or self-blame. The goal is calm observation. If every concern turns into an argument about your supposed insecurity, if every question becomes a critique of your character, if every attempt at clarity ends with you apologizing, the pattern is revealing itself. Blame shifting is not just deflection. It is a way of controlling the emotional storyline so the truth stays hidden. And when the truth cannot be spoken, it speaks through behavior instead. When someone feels the need to hide the truth, their biggest fear is being discovered. This fear often leads to over-explaining, giving excessive details that are not asked for, or retelling simple events in a way that sounds rehearsed. In psychology, this is known as impression management, an attempt to control how others see you. A woman who is cheating may suddenly become unusually descriptive about where she was, who she was with, and what she was doing. But the tone feels forced rather than natural. The purpose of over-explaining is to create the illusion of transparency while actually avoiding the core truth. You can recognize this pattern by the emotional energy behind the explanation. Instead of calm, steady conversation, her words may feel rushed, defensive, or overly polished. She may add small emotional details to make the story feel more believable, such as emphasizing how boring the evening was or how annoying someone else behaved. These emotional embellishments are used to guide your perception, not simply to share information. When honesty is real, it tends to be simple. When guilt is present, explanations become scripted. Another sign of over-explaining is the sudden desire to justify behavior that never required justification before. For example, if she used to mention plans casually but now feels the need to explain why she is going out, why her phone was off, or why she didn't respond quickly, it may indicate internal guilt. The explanation is less about informing you and more about reassuring herself that the truth won't surface. The more someone fears exposure, the more they talk. Not out of openness, but out of anxiety. Again, awareness is the key. The goal is not to assume guilt solely from a long explanation. Rather, it is to notice when explanations start to feel performed instead of conversational. When words are used to manage perception instead of communicate experience, the emotional truth of the relationship is shifting. Recognizing that shift allows you to step back and observe patterns calmly, rather than getting pulled into confusion or self-doubt. When someone is hiding a betrayal, one of the most common psychological strategies they rely on is deflection. Instead of answering a question directly, they shift the focus away from themselves. In female communication patterns, deflection often appears in phrases like, "Why are you being so insecure?" or "You're overthinking again." The intention is to make you question your perception rather than examine her behavior. Psychology refers to this as cognitive reframing, where the guilty individual attempts to reshape the emotional narrative from their actions to your reactions. This deflection is powerful because it targets uncertainty. It plants doubt in your mind and encourages you to wonder whether your feelings are the issue. What's important to recognize is not the phrase itself, but the timing. If simple neutral questions, such as asking how her day went or who she spent time with, consistently lead to emotional defensiveness, it suggests she is protecting something she doesn't want examined. Communication should feel open and natural. If it suddenly feels guarded or tense, that is meaningful. Deflection also shows in the avoidance of specifics. A woman hiding another relationship or emotional attachment may answer in vague language. Instead of names, she uses just a friend. Instead of details, she offers brief summaries that shut conversation down quickly. The goal is to close the topic before curiosity can follow. If you notice that direct questions repeatedly lead to irritation, accusation, or dismissal, the emotional pattern is speaking louder than the words themselves. Recognizing deflection does not mean jumping to conclusions or responding with aggression. The purpose is awareness. When communication shifts from cooperation to defensiveness, from openness to avoidance, it signals that the truth in the relationship is losing space. The goal is not to confront reactively, but to observe calmly. Patterns reveal reality more clearly than arguments ever do. One of the most telling psychological indicators of hidden infidelity is a sudden shift in privacy and emotional availability. When a woman is hiding a new emotional or romantic attachment, she often begins to guard parts of her life that were previously open. This may include her phone, her social media habits, her schedule, or even small details about her day. The change is not always dramatic. It usually begins quietly. Where she once placed her phone face up, she now keeps it face down. Where she once shared daily stories freely, she now answers with short, vague responses. This withdrawal is not from you as a person, but from the fear of exposing what she is protecting. Emotional distance often follows physical or conversational withdrawal. Shared intimacy, the small daily moments, inside jokes, warm glance, begins to fade. Conversations become shorter and more practical, lacking depth or warmth. She may appear distracted when you speak, or her attention seems elsewhere. Psychology describes this as emotional reallocation, the subconscious shifting of emotional energy from one relationship into another. She is not simply less talkative. She is investing emotional presence somewhere else. This distancing is frequently justified with explanations that sound reasonable on the surface. I just need some space and I'm stressed, or I'm going through something. While these statements may contain truth, the pattern is what matters. If emotional distance is paired with secrecy, guarded behavior, and reduced affection, the shift is significant. Relationships naturally go through phases. But when intimacy disappears suddenly and without clear cause, It is rarely accidental. The purpose of recognizing this pattern is not to accuse or confront in haste. It is to regain clarity. Emotional closeness does not vanish without reason. When someone begins withholding presence, warmth, or access to their inner world, they are managing two emotional realities at once. Awareness allows you to respond with calm steadiness rather than confusion. And in moments where clarity feels clouded, consistency, not panic, becomes your strongest guide. One of the most reliable psychological indicators of deception is inconsistency. When someone is telling the truth, their story remains steady even when retold under different emotional conditions. But when someone is hiding something, especially something emotionally charged like infidelity, the details tend to shift. You may notice that the time, location, reason, or emotional tone of an event changes slightly every time she describes it. These are not random mistakes. They occur because fabricated stories are harder to remember than real ones. The mind struggles to maintain consistency when the emotional motivation is concealment rather than honesty. This inconsistency can appear in subtle ways. Perhaps she first tells you she was out with a friend, but later mentions a group. Or maybe she says she was tired and went home early, only to later tell a different version that includes staying out later than expected. The shifts may seem small, almost insignificant, and that is why they are so powerful. Cheating is rarely revealed through dramatic confessions. It is uncovered in the quiet, unguarded errors of memory. Psychology calls this cognitive load the mental strain of maintaining a false narrative. Another common pattern is emotional inconsistency. For example, she may speak about someone with intense irritation one day and casual fondness the next. Or she may suddenly stop mentioning a person altogether after they were once a normal part of her life. Both extremes, overemphasizing or abruptly erasing, can signal that an emotional boundary is being hidden. When someone is truly unimportant, their presence in conversation is neutral. When someone is emotionally significant, their presence becomes carefully managed. What matters most is not to interrogate or accuse, but to observe quietly. When stories change, when timelines shift, when emotional tones wobble, it is not your job to force the truth out. The role of awareness is to see patterns clearly without being overwhelmed by emotion. Inconsistency does not always reveal the entire truth, but it always reveals that something is being protected. And the moment you begin to see this, you stop doubting yourself and start trusting what the behavior is already telling you. Cheating is not revealed through a single sentence or a single slip. It is revealed through patterns, the tone of conversations, the shifting of emotional presence, the sudden privacy, the inconsistencies in stories. These signs speak more truth than any explanation ever will. The purpose of understanding these psychological cues is not to create confrontation or to attack. It is to reclaim your clarity so you no longer argue with your own intuition. Your instincts are not the enemy. They are the part of you that recognizes emotional reality before your mind rationalizes it away. When communication turns into defensiveness, when connection becomes distant, when answers feel performed instead of felt, something meaningful is changing. You do not need to force the truth. You do not need to chase clarity through arguments. You simply step back, watch, and remain grounded. Truth reveals itself when emotion settles. And in relationships, the truth always comes to the surface because behavior cannot stay in conflict with reality forever. In the end, your strength is not in catching someone. Your strength is in knowing who you are when the situation becomes uncertain. Calm observation, slow response, and steady self-respect protect your peace and prevent emotional chaos from controlling your decisions. When you trust what you see rather than what you are told to believe, you take your power back. Awareness is not about ending love. It is about ensuring that when you love, you do so with clarity and dignity.